Welcome to Behind the Neon Lights, Understanding Personal Injury Law in Las Vegas and Beyond.
Welcome to Behind the Neon Lights, Understanding Personal Injury Law in Las Vegas and Beyond with CJaredClark, owner and founder of Clark Law Group, specializing in auto collisions, motorcycle crashes, and personal injury law, and dedicated to helping clients every step of the way. My name is John Clements. Today's episode is What If They Blame You? Understanding Comparative Fault in Nevada. So first of all, Jared, it's always a pleasure to see you. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, let's dig into it because I have lots of questions about this. First question is, what is comparative fault? It's not immediately obvious to me what that even is. So what is it, and how can that affect the outcome of a personal injury case?
Yeah, in typical lawyer fashion, they got that in science, right? They have to use words that just don't give any idea of what it may mean, right? It's clues, right? So comparative fault is shared fault, right? Oftentimes when, anything in life, there's usually not one contributing factor of why something has happened, right? So in what we do in personal injury, comparative fault means that the person who is bringing the claim against the at-fault party may also bear some fault. They may bear some negligence, right? It's possible that they weren't paying all the way attention. It's possible that maybe they could have avoided the accident and failed to do so because they didn't have a proper lookout. There's a number of reasons why someone could also share in comparative fault. But that's effectively what it means in layman's terms.
Got it. So then I've talked with some other lawyers in different states about this idea. And so in Nevada in particular, if someone is partly responsible for their own accident, but maybe not fully, right? There's that comparative element. Can they still get damages from that accident?
It varies from state to state, but here in the state of Nevada, you could still be at fault and still seek damages from the other party. Now, there's a few caveats with that. One is you need to keep that number 50% or less. Okay. So if a judge, a jury, an arbitrator, or the insurance company finds that you are 51% or more responsible for causing the incident, that's when the state of Nevada is going to bar you or prevent you from getting any recovery. Right, your case kind of just disappears, and you're not allowed to seek any compensation for that. So that's the magic number, is 50%.
So is that number arrived at in like a scientific manner, or is it more of like a gut feel? Like, how do they even do that?
It's right in the middle. I think it's just more of a gut feeling that, when this law came about many years ago, that's what it was. There was actually a law in place in some states. I believe it still exists. And, we all learn it in law school, but it's called contributory negligence. And what that means that if you are deemed 1% at fault, that barred you from any recovery. A lot of states went away from that because I felt like they felt the injustice in that.
Yeah, that seems totally not fair.
Right. If you're 1% at fault or 2% at fault, you can't seek any recovery, but I believe that's still in the books. I haven't looked to see what states still adhere to that, but that's contributory negligence, and that could be fatal.
Yeah, that sounds like I hope that's not true in my state. I have to look that up because that sounds terrible. And then as far as determining fault, I assume that, like, for instance, if you were taking a case, you would want to bring in some expert testimony to help establish that kind of percentage. Is that right?
Absolutely. It gets a lot more complicated than people think of. Hey, I get clients all the time. I wasn't at fault. That's a much more nuanced issue than people realize, right? Obviously, there's a legal fault to that, and they need to learn exactly what does that mean with negligence and comparative fault. But yes, experts hiring accident reconstructionists to kind of recreate the scene, or biomechanical engineers to see what type of forces were sent to the occupants in the vehicle. So there's a lot of different experts that could be hired. A lighting expert, maybe if it was a darker area, right, when reaction time, when someone should have saw the vehicle in front of them and should have been able to avoid a particular incident. So it gets very complicated at times where we need effectively scientists to come in.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
What's going on.
Yeah. And so as we're talking about fault and who's at fault and determining who's at fault, I'm going to go out on a limb and just say that I think probably insurance companies want to put more fault on one party than another. I'm just going to just go out on a
Yeah.
limb. So
I don't know why you think that, John, but you're
I
right.
don't know. So assuming that's true, what are some tactics that insurance companies use to try to shift blame onto those injured parties who are actually the victims?
Yeah, we see all type of stuff. I could just share one. We signed up a client a couple weeks ago, and our client is going through the light. They have a green ball going directly straight through the light, doing a speed limit. Another vehicle runs a red light, right? They are attributing 10% to our client. Now, obviously, we're going to contest this. We asked what was their basis, and they said, "Oh, well, your client should have been able to see the person coming, running the red light, and avoid the incident." There's absolutely no basis for that, right? And in fact, there's a law here in the state of Nevada that, and this is kind of a common sense law or a common sense thing as well, where there's an expectation that other drivers on the road are going to obey traffic devices, traffic signals, right? Because that means if not, at every green light, what would we do? We would go to the light and stop to make sure someone else isn't going to run a red light. Traffic doesn't work like that. That's just not how it's designed to work. So that's probably the most common one. There's this thing called failure. An officer could fight you for failure to use due care. Well, that's a very general term of, due care, right? You didn't use due care. You weren't paying attention. And that's just not true, right? I mean, if you're going at 45 miles per hour through a light, you're not anticipating that someone is coming from the left or the right to you to T-bone you, at 45, 50 miles per hour. And by the time you do try to recognize that, especially if you're 50 or 60% through the light, it's impossible, right? So that's a real life scenario that happens a lot. And they have no leg to stand on, when they do that. But it's frustrating because insurance companies do take that approach.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that a little bit more because I'm not a lawyer. I don't handle these kinds of cases all the time. And sometimes when someone tells me something that's so far out of the realm of possibility that I like literally don't know how to respond, like it's so wrong, it's just not even in the same zip code.
Right.
So how do you approach these kinds of issues when you're defending clients and these insurance companies try to use these ridiculous strategies?
Oftentimes, it depends on what's at stake. Sometimes I can tell you the bulk of the times you just have to file a lawsuit and have it overturned in litigation, right? Insurance companies are very, very, think about the most stubborn person in your life. That's an insurance company, right? So they don't move off their pivot sometimes, especially when it's this arbitrary, right, type defense. So depending on the damages and where the cases are at, sometimes I feel like that's just something that they say and do, and then their settlement won't really reflect that number. But oftentimes we got to file a lawsuit between depositions and discovery and allow, a trier of fact to kind of decide, is this BS or is this legitimate?
Yeah. So then that kind of brings up a question that just relatedly, so if I'm in an accident and I don't think I'm at fault, as soon as I get medical care, should I be calling you like the next thing that I do?
Absolutely. You want to preserve all of your rights. Try not to interfere with them. People oftentimes interfere with their rights, and it's on accident, right? But you do that by not calling a lawyer first to learn what your rights are. Oftentimes, we could get on the phone pretty quickly to make sure that we're protecting your rights, make sure certain evidence and documents are being preserved, and information that we're going to need to ultimately prove your claim.
Yeah, so let's talk about that because that kind of leads into my next question, which is helping people be proactive. Now, obviously, no one's planning on getting on an accident, but if you do get on an accident, is there a certain kind or type of documentation or strategy that you should be aware of, or as this is going forward?
Yeah, you want to try to document as much as you can and get as much information as you can at the scene. And what type of information am I speaking of? Always call the police, right? You want the police to come out. That's a government independent investigating department that's going to come and likely issue a citation. They're going to do their own investigation. So we could piggyback oftentimes when they do a proper investigation off of their investigation and their report. Even prior to them getting there, though, you want to, if there was anybody who witnessed the incident, You want to get their name, phone number, email, and address, right? Because we're going to want to get witness statements from these folks. They're going to be very, very critical. We know America is very hustle and bustle, and everybody's on their way to wherever they're going, but there are more people out there, humanitarian folks that will stop, check on you, make sure and get their information, right? You want to make sure and take photographs at the scene, ideally if you can, before the vehicles are rearranged or moved, right? But it tells it gives a picture of the scene, exactly how it happened right after the impact. That's important because once things have been moved, and especially if there's no tire marks, right, that information is pretty important. And lastly, you want to contact the lawyer to make sure that they're putting good use to all this information and this evidence that you did at the scene of the incident.
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone's carrying around a recording device in their pockets at all times. So hopefully you'd be able to get some good evidence out of it that way.
Absolutely.
To kind of go along with that, do you ever, as you're investigating a case or preparing for a trial or what have you, do you ever have to go, sequester or try to get footage from local businesses or like from ring cams, anything like that?
Yes. It's much more infrequent that crashes are caught on video recorder. We love Teslas because they record them. So that has been something great for our space, right? There's several different cameras and, you're going to get the information, who's lying, who's not. The truth is going to come out, But oftentimes if the incident happens in front of an establishment or, maybe on a corner where of a residential neighborhood and the backyard could see over the wall in that intersection. I had a cousin who was involved in a pretty horrific accident. There happened to be a 2-story home and they had a camera on their home and they got that exact intersection. Of course, that guy tried to lie to say that he had the green light and the picture or the video showed clear as daylight that was just inaccurate and, just a complete lie. So we love when that happens. Sadly, in the state of Nevada, Clark County in particular, a lot of the traffic lights, they have a camera that sits on top. However, they do not record. And we have been trying to push legislation and things to have those record. There's a lot of good reasons for that to happen. And unfortunately, we've been unsuccessful, but they do not record. And that's something that clients come and say often, like, hey, there's a camera right at that intersection. And I got to let them know, hey, Public Works with Clark County runs those. Those are just live feeds, most of them. They do not record. There's not a server that they sit on or anything of that nature. So, business establishments, Ring cameras, Vivint systems, things of that nature are amazing.
Nice. And I wanted to key in on one thing you said just with this last question, because you said, in this one particular case, we caught it on camera and one of the parties was lying. And so obviously telling the truth is of paramount importance at all times.
Right.
But what happens when you have the client who says, I want to tell the truth, but I'm worried that I'm going to get blamed for something if I'm honest?
So, one, I have a conversation with them about telling the truth is a good thing. Two, I also comfort them or let them know that they are protected, right? We have what's called attorney-client confidentiality, all righty? And that's been one of the cornerstones in what we do for hundreds and hundreds of years, okay? And that's because we want to foster a honest, transparent conversation where the client could just be honest about what has happened. We're not allowed to, they hold that privilege, so we're not allowed to go and share those confidences. And I can't get online and say, hey, guess what happened to Mr. So-and-so today? And, a lot of communications that we had, those things are protected. So hopefully that makes clients feel a lot better. Typically it does. And then I caution them and we go into a conversation about how, you can't really say anything that's going to, only by refusing to provide information that could hurt your case. By providing more information, that could usually only help your case.
Yeah, exactly. Because your job as their attorney is to take the truth and, that's what you're supposed to work with, right? That's like the ideal thing you're supposed to be doing anyway. So,
the facts are the facts, right?
Facts are the facts. That's right. And as I've talked with some other lawyers, they've assured me that if you lie to your lawyer and it comes out in court, you're going to have a really mad lawyer on your hands.
Yes. And oftentimes, when we, people do lie, unfortunately, right? And when we find out that they're liars, we usually withdraw from the representation.
Yeah, I can imagine. So yeah, definitely telling the truth, sticking with the facts is the best policy. Yes. Well, Jared, as usual, it's just always just a delight to talk with you, man. Thanks for jumping on today.
Hey, I appreciate you. You have a good one, John.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning into Behind the Neon Lights, Understanding Personal Injury Law in Las Vegas and Beyond with CJaredClark. To connect with the team, head to injuryattorneyvegas.com. As always, like, subscribe, leave a review, and we hope to see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.